We're back. I am McKendrick. That is Trey.
And this is the Cold-Blooded Caffeine Podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking about how to vend a reptile show with coffee. So this is going to be a companion to the YouTube video that we did this week. So if you haven't checked out the YouTube video, the link will be in the show notes. So check that out. It'll give you some visuals behind what our display looks like and kind of the nuts and bolts of what it takes to run a reptile expo with coffee. But in this podcast, we're going to talk about some of the more nuances of what we have to do with our setup and maybe some of the hurdles that we had to overcome when we started to approach vending a reptile show with coffee.
Of course, first thing you got to know of is what all do you want to take, right? So we always kind of go back to some of the historical locations that we've been, the size of the crowd and amount of people that are coming. And then from there, that dictates like how many displays we want to have up for coffee, how much coffee we want to bring. And then that just proliferates down into everything else, filters, the mixers that we want to bring, and everything, the flavors, the sugars, the creams, like literally everything. So first starts out with, trying to determine how much you think you'll sell, because that dictates how many displays that we're going to have up.
Yeah, so every show we're going to bring coffee to sell in bags of some sort. And we typically bring, at least we're going to bring ground coffee and whole bean.
And whole bean, absolutely, all the time.
And the ratio depends on the event, like you're saying, and, how many people we expect through the door. Typically, we bring like a 1 to 3 ratio of whole bean to ground.
Yeah.
But that can vary depending on the event that we go to.
Yeah, I think most people are your regular drip coffee drinkers. So you're going to sell primarily more ground coffee. So we typically have more ground coffee for sale than whole bean.
And then the kind of the next consideration to make is what are we doing in terms of brewed coffee? So the first show that we ever did, we trialed selling coffee at a show and we didn't bring a brewer. And I think that was a pretty big mistake for us, because I think a lot of people just missed that offering. So we started bringing a brewer to a show fairly early on, but we've kind of wavered back and forth between the Chemexes and the drip brewer, and I think we're back on the Chemexes because of the visual aspect of it.
Yeah, I think, you hear people oftentimes come up and say, this looks like a science experiment. Like when you look at the Chemexes, the scales that we're using, the gooseneck kennels, everyone looks at it and a lot of times are amazed. Some people have never seen that setup before. So I think that itself attracts people in. I think the first thing that attracts them in is probably the smell.
The smell.
Yeah. So once we start brewing coffee, people's nose are in the air trying to find out where it's coming from. They get to the table and they see a pour over setup and it's like, oh, wow, this is like nice.
Yeah.
Right. So I think those are the things that kind of draws people in. So yeah, we've been back and forth. The brewer, of course, is easier.
Yeah.
But I think the display, like you're saying, provides such a heightened visual effect that it draws people in.
And it took us a while to get to the brewer too, because that was one of the first challenges that we had to overcome was water and heat. Availability in a non-traditional cafe style setup, right?
Right.
So that was kind of where the kettles came in to begin with, was trying to get heat and hot water in a place where coffee isn't normally served. So
and then that creates, because those kettles draw a lot of power.
They do, yeah.
So that was actually another hurdle we had to overcome that we experienced firsthand. Was in Chicago?
Well, we did the first one, When we were in Tinley, the first time we came to Tinley, we tried to power all 3 kettles off of the same outlet, and it kept tripping the outlet.
Yeah.
So we could only run. I think we ended up only running 1 kettle.
Yes.
That first Tinley.
Yeah.
Which was, of course, very hectic.
Correct.
But we've gotten better at it, and especially now that we're in the lobby at a lot of the NARBC shows, it really helps us spread our power out because there's more outlets that aren't being used instead of being on the show floor. But generally at shows, where we can, we'll spread it across at least 2 outlets. And a lot of it's not necessarily the outlet tripping and flipping the breaker, but it's more that our power strips
Correct.
are tripping. So
Right.
we're spreading them across multiple power strips and therefore multiple outlets.
Correct.
Right? Because of that. So we're doing that to manage the power. But it took us a while to find a brewer that we could use that allowed us to not have a hard lined water source. So that was the second challenge, was how do we get water?
Right.
And of course, you know, there are a couple of different ways you could go about it. Just bringing in bottles of water, like small bottles of water, and pouring them in was one consideration that I did early on. But of course, the waste involved with that would be quite large. But then we ended up settling on 5-gallon jugs.
Yep.
And our first iteration was actually like an Amazon.
What do you even call that?
What do you call it? Like a pump, like a
like a
little.
I don't know. Electric? Not.
It's a battery powered pump.
But it's actually
sat on top of the 5-gallon bucket of water.
That thing's really cool.
It did. Yeah, it did. We rocked that for a while. I mean, I think we did that for a year and a half, maybe.
Close
to a year.
Near the end, that's when we invested in more, because I think we didn't charge it one weekend or something.
Yeah, that was the big thing, is the charging and it was a little slow, like not bad, but it was a little slow, and you had to place the 5-gallon bucket up so that you wouldn't have to bend over, and there was an ergonomic issue with that. So
we used to sit it in like a chair or something with some medium size height, just to prevent the ergonomic issues from happening. But it's still like we made it work, but it wasn't the most efficient operation.
And so typically for a show, with that in mind, we would bring four or five 5-gallon jugs of water to a show. And depending on where that show is, we would either, like, they're refillable jugs, so we would take them to like a local hardware store and get them swapped out. But we would either do that before heading to the show if it was more of a local show, or like in the case of the Tinley Park or the St. Louis, we would take them empty. And we would take them empty, and then fill them, so we wouldn't have the weight in the van or the trailer. So, but now the most recent thing that we've done is we've added in like a mobile sink, which also has it uses this kind of the similar idea of the 5-gallon jugs,
right? 5 gallons,
but it actually has like a pump, like a
and it's
hardline pump that
connected directly to the bottom of the faucet. So you're literally using a faucet like a faucet, right? You're turning it on, water's coming out. You're getting more, through the spout. So it's faster fill for your gooseneck kennels. So that is
and the height consideration is better. So you're not having to worry about setting something up on a chair.
So ergonomic stuff is eliminated. You're refilling the gooseneck kennels faster, which means now you're processing faster, the rotation of getting more coffee made. So and that was a huge win for us to come up with that idea. And Trey came up with it. I mean, he saw it, saw the need, and some of it is you see the operation in action, and from a second or third party, you can see the inefficiencies in it. Whereas for me, I'm in the moment, making coffee, just doing what I do and figuring out little nuances to make it a little bit better. But
and I think some of it's like that's my personality. Is I'm never really quite satisfied with the way things are, and I'm like, okay, that's great, but let's tweak it a little bit. So I mean, that's not to say that this is the last iteration of our coffee water distribution, but it's certainly well on its way.
And we've come a long way. Like probably every month or two, we'll see something a little bit different or new to add to the process to make it more efficient. Remember, we had the cards for the for light, medium, and dark roast.
Yeah, how we communicate. So I'm usually the one that takes the orders and is talking to the customer about both the reptiles and the coffee, and I'm chit-chatting with them, and you're the one that's over making the coffee.
Right.
And that was the big deal, is how do we communicate? Like there's no visual other than on the screen of the register.
Like a big, fast food chain board that says, this, order 521 is, a light roast.
Hey, don't tempt me. I'll have one up.
That'll be the next thing we have at a show.
But I mean, I think we started, like you're saying, with like notes written on the back of a business card,
right,
passing them to
passing
each other.
them. It's like, okay,
But we ended up settling on like
like
waitress pads,
style tickets,
style tickets that we could pass to each other.
Yeah, put the
or
little
set in a
perforated ticket at the
designated-
bottom with the number you give to them. They come back.
So I mean that works pretty well. As well as we need it to.
I was about to say, outside of going like digital and big, I think that's probably that's very solid idea to make sure, especially when we got volume.
Yeah,
like when it's not as hectic, it's manageable.
Yeah.
But when you're making 3 to 6 cups of coffee at a time, some need flavor, some need creamer, some need non-dairy,
and then we continue to implement like iced coffee versus
cold
brew versus hot.
Yeah.
So as we get more complex in our offerings, and we do want to continue to offer what the customers want,
absolutely,
but that makes it more
of a challenge.
Important, that we are managing that communication.
And communication is crisp. Yeah.
So
I think that's definitely a good one that we've overcome and made a lot of improvements on. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe one of the last things is something that most people don't think about, but it's the like legal aspects of selling a consumable product
right
at a venue that's not designed to do that. So that's more the behind the scenes stuff that we have to do ahead of the show. But just like with any other food truck or food vendor, we have to abide by the local laws of wherever we're doing that show. So some cities and states are a little bit easier than others, but some require temporary business licenses or food truck vendor licenses or things like the hand washing sinks in some places, or some places like you have to have hot and cold water. So we do have like a hot water heater a mobile hot water heater to attach to a hand washing sink. Some places require you to have like a 3-sink wash, rinse, sanitize station, just like you would on a food truck.
Right.
Coffee's kind of an interesting food or beverage because some regions categorize it as a non-temperature sensitive consumable, which means that it's not regulated quite the same way as like something like milk would be,
correct,
or something that could spoil and cause harm.
Yeah, but milk is
milk is a good one. So I mean, now that we've started to supply milk, we also have like refrigeration
requirements that are different from state to state.
So that's something that I think it's not as obvious when we're there serving, because we've already done that legwork and that background ahead of time, understanding where we're going to be. But it's certainly a consideration, for what we do, and something that we had to. It was definitely a learning curve for us to do as we started to get things set up. So
I mean, those are like probably the top things that are important for us when we're vending, to make sure we have done our due diligence based on where we're going, where we're setting up, what state we're in, if there's any local laws that we need to abide by, and then just strategic about the unload process, what we bring in first, second, third, like tablecloths is one of those things you got to bring in first to make sure you can go ahead and get stuff on the tables. And then, just the overall organization with getting the register set up early enough that we can start taking orders, getting, the air pots or the airscape containers out early enough that, because as soon as you get set up, not even set up, someone's going to come and start asking for coffee. You got to be ready for it.
We've gotten it down to a pretty well-oiled machine at this point, but every time we do a show, we tweak it and we do a little bit something different just to try to improve it. Most recently, so with some new business ventures that we've started, we acquired a van, which has really helped us to minimize the amount of extra equipment that we have to bring. So previously we were pulling a trailer, which has its hurdles. I mean, it's just so much easier to pull a van. There's really no other way to say it than
pulling a van.
Just driving the van,
it in the back of the van,
then having
taking off. So that's a huge plus.
And especially when we're talking about long distance travels.
For sure.
St. Louis or Chicago, Tinley Park, 12 to 17 hours pulling
Yeah.
the trailers is no fun for anybody. So now, I mean, using the van now has been a big game changer for us, and we'll continue to improve as we go along.
Yeah.
But
and we're capable of doing outdoor events as well. We have generators and stuff like that, so it's really the same process. But we have generators that we can use that allow us to basically manage and maintain the same setup.
Yep.
And
we can run the same setup that we do inside of the reptile show. We can do it outside.
Yep.
We've done several events. So yeah.
All right. I think that's about it, man. That's what it is to vend the show and the details kind of behind the scene.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you at the next podcast.
Until next time.